Welcome to the TDCC Community Live webinar. TDCC stands for the Developing Child Center, located in Dubai. Established in 2012, we have been providing personalized support to over 1,000 children. We have 60 dedicated and committed experts, and we work closely with parents and schools to ensure no child is left behind. We think different, we teach different. We empower, not limit children. Labels like autism, dyslexia, and ADHD are not relevant or perceived as disabilities, difficulties, or disorders that limit children's abilities. We believe that brilliance needs difference. The TDCC services are available in English, French, and Arabic. The inclusive educational services nurture and support the developmental and educational needs and help empower each child to reach their full potential. Occupational therapy assists children in performing and achieving important learning and developmental skills they need in life. Psychomotor therapy is a healthcare profession that is based on a holistic view of the person and is involved in the treatment of different disorders. Speech and language therapy assists children who have disorders of speech, language, communication, and swallowing. Psychology provides both educational and clinical services, including counseling and parenting. ABA therapy focuses on improving specific behaviors. It is commonly practiced as a therapeutic intervention for individuals with autism. Specialist learning support. We assist in developing the academic and social development of students who need support in all these areas. And we design and host local and international training and workshops for practitioners, parents, caregivers, and educators. Just like this one today. We have a few rules to follow during the webinar. Please remain muted while the speaker is presenting. Please give your full attention to the presentation. We will be sending you the replay, so you can review it anytime. Please be interactive if the speaker requests your participation.
Welcome to the 53rd TDCC Worldwide Live webinar on understanding the brain's role in learning challenges with the Arrowsmith Program. Today, we are honored to have two distinguished guest speakers from the Arrowsmith Program, Debbie Gilmore and Rita Margarita. Debbie Gilmore, the Executive Director of the Arrowsmith Program, brings a wealth of experience as a teacher, principal, and administrator. She is deeply passionate about the brain's role in learning and student success, and she advocates for integrating neuroplastic programming into education to enhance cognitive functioning and foster lifelong learners. Debbie holds a master's in education and various graduate certificates in diverse learning. Rita Margarita serves as the European and Middle East representative of the Arrowsmith Program. Her journey with the program began through her son's success, which inspired her to become a qualified teacher and learning center administrator. With a background in foreign languages and literature, Rita is dedicated to making neuroplasticity-based education accessible, creating inclusive environments that empower students to reach their full potential. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Debbie and Rita.
We've had a beautiful couple of days, Rita and I, sharing, being with the TDCC community, both in Dubai and in Abu Dhabi. And today we had the pleasure of walking through the new center in Abu Dhabi. Delightful. And so we are really pleased to be able to be here and share this with you. Now, I am just trying, there we are. I was having a little bit of trouble finding my slideshow. So here we are. It's really just delightful to be with you. And I think the video that we just saw will show you why we're here, because TDCC are committed to children. They're committed to the success of children. And that is what Arrowsmith also is about. So making sure that our children are successful in life and can fulfill a role in the community. So it's my pleasure and Rita's pleasure to be here. So thank you very much. What we know, sorry, just need to get my computer going. What we know, and Arrowsmith talk a lot about the brain. Our brain is our most important asset. And I think as we go through our everyday life, we actually forget that it's our brain that's driving everything we do. It's not only getting us physically through the day, it's behind our thoughts, it's behind our actions, and it helps us do every single task that we're being asked to do through the day. So I think sometimes we forget that. What we know also is that the brain is complex. We ask the brain to do very simple tasks and very complex tasks. And to do that, we use the series of highways and stations that are in our brains, our networks and our connections that are activated and collaborate together to complete those tasks. Actually, how we see the world is how our brain sees the world. And because our brains are all unique, we probably see the world uniquely different than other people. So that's actually so exciting in our brains. We know the brain has many, many brain networks. So we have different networks of the brain for all of these things here that you can see on the screen. So memory, executive function, language, maths, writing, socializing, taking notes, all of these are using our complex highways of networks in our brain. I alluded to this before. Each and every one of us have a unique cognitive profile. So if I say to 10 people in the room, we talk about strengths and weaknesses that we have in our how we do things. They're going to be unique. We're going to find that how our cognitive profile reacts or is unique. In fact, Arrowsmith did asked a researcher to have a look at about over 1,700 samples of an Arrowsmith assessment, and we can collect data on 19 different cognitive functions. But the researcher said to us, actually, I love data, but that's too many data points. So he reduced the data points to 9 data points, 9 cognitive functions. And he looked at the profiles of those over 1,700 people. I think it was about 1,765. And he looked at the cognitive profile. So how each of the cognitive functions, the 9 cognitive functions that he decided to look at, he looked at how they operated. He then looked at the rating scale that Arrowsmith collects on those functions. And then he looked at how unique they were. 75% of those cognitive profiles were unique. So if you think about that, that was on 9 cognitive functions. If we add in the other 10, you can imagine how much more unique. It would be much greater than 75% of individuals that would have a unique cognitive profile. Today, you're going to hear me talk a lot about cognitive functions. Arrowsmith, while we talk about the brain and the networks of the brain, actually, we kind of go a little deeper than that. We look actually at the cognitive functions of the brain. So what is a cognitive function? It's a region of the brain or a network of regions which perform a specific role to do certain tasks. And these cognitive functions, as I talked about before, operate across a spectrum of capacity between very severe and superior. Somewhere, all of us have our cognitive functions along this scale. And not all the cognitive functions will be at the same level. There's going to be a whole range that they sit across that spectrum of functioning. There are many different cognitive functions in the brain. Here are some of them. This is not a test. You don't need to remember these, and all of these are on our website. But we have cognitive functions for these particular aspects. These are the things that we need to do in our life, and these are the cognitive functions that are working in our brain to help us perform particular tasks. So, what do we ask our children to do every day when they go to school? Let's have a look at that. We ask them to acquire academic skills. We ask them to go into the playground, do some sport, go out onto the sport field, walk the hallways of the school. We ask them to follow instructions and learn the rules, and not only learn the rules, stick to the rules. And we also ask them to make and maintain friendships. Okay, so they're very typical tasks that we would expect children to be able to do. But have we ever thought what lies beneath those particular tasks? What functions lie underneath those? So let's have a look. So to acquire academic skills calls on many, many different cognitive functions. On the screen here, you'll see these are the cognitive functions that Arrowsmith actually can strengthen. So what's required for reading, writing, and math skills? These are the array of cognitive functions that are required to do those skills. So let's have a look at the next one, making, and we'll come back to those academic areas. Rita's going to talk about those in more depth later on. So what about making and keeping friends? Which cognitive functions are required for that? Okay. What's the next task we ask them to do? Follow rules and instructions. What are we required for that? I think you'll see a pattern here that some of these cognitive functions are reappearing. What about navigating hallways, playgrounds, and sports fields? Here we are again. So those what seem simple tasks, that very ordinary everyday tasks that we expect our children to do, actually are pulling on many different cognitive functions to allow them to get through that particular task. And quite often they're doing 2, if not 3 of those tasks that were there before all at once. So they could be walking through walking down the hallway, speaking with their friends, following instructions and rules, all at the same time. So they're really calling a lot of cognitive functions. It's what our brain does. It does it automatically. If we ask teachers and parents, what do we want for our children? We actually want them to realize their full potential. I heard that in the TDCC video before, and I'm pretty certain from the parents and the educators that I speak with frequently, no one has ever argued with me that we do not want these things. We want them to reach their full potential. We want them to cope with the normal stresses of life. We want them to be productive and fruitful in their work and in their life and make a contribution to the community, as well as having feeling successful and having a good sense of well-being. We also want them to be empathetic and compassionate. And these are the things that the World Health Organization defines as good mental health. So this is what we want our children to do. We also, as educators, and I believe as parents, want our children to learn and be lifelong learners. Also something that TDCC hold very closely. We want our children to be lifelong learners. And there's another term for that. We want them to be 21st century learners. And here are the skills on the screen that the World Economic Forum put together of what they see as 21st century learning skills. Now, the academic areas, as you can see there, the foundational literacies are very important and very concentrated on in school. But have a look at the competencies and character qualities. Schools do a great job at exposing students to being able to be involved in activities where these skills are used. But actually, to be a critical thinker, to have curiosity, to be a leader, to collaborate and to communicate actually needs particular brain functions or cognitive functions to be working as they should. So we'll hear a little bit more about that through this seminar. So again, this is where I'm handing over to Rita.
Thank you,
Rita.
Debbie. Thank you very much. So let's dive into the cognitive functions of the brain, more specifically, I would say. So this displayed on screen now are the cognitive functions that we, the Arrowsmith program, can address, which are the main functions used for learning. They can be compared, and I like this analogy, to an orchestra. Musical instrument within an orchestra. If any instrument in an orchestra is not playing well, at some extent the musical piece will suffer. And this is what we want about the cognitive functions involved in learning: to be strong, to play well, to perform well. So in the next slide, we will see the cognitive functions involved in the reading process. These are 10 cognitive functions that come to play within these processes of reading. And you can look at them and note the colors, because they will come back later into other processes as well. So next slide, it displays the cognitive functions that are required in the writing processes. And if any of those are underperforming, it will matter at some extent into the writing skills, into the writing process, put into on paper or whatever is the writing involved in. So these are all the cognitive functions that are required in mathematics, in any mathematical, in any aspect of mathematics. So if any of these functions is weak, it will impact the mathematical processes at some extent. So next slide is, okay, now we see what are the cognitive function mattering to these profiles, to a dyslexic, dysgraphic, dyscalculic profile. So we need to see that the Arrowsmith program goes underneath these labels. So we have this diagnosis, we have this psychoeducational assessment that students or parents bring to us. We read them, but we never base our program on that assessment. We go under the label. So there will be an Arrowsmith assessment that specifically will measure every cognitive function involved in these processes, in these like profiles. And then we will address for each individual's. We see a dyslexic profile. What are the cognitive functions that are underneath the dyslexic profile? And you see that there are 7 involved. They might not be all the 7 very grave at a different extent, and some can be even average. In fact, all the dyscalculic or dyslexic students have really very different profiles, very different rate of this cognitive function underperforming. That's why we really need to go and understand at what level the student is impacted in these learning processes. Dysgraphia again, so we see the cognitive functions involved in these profiles. Memory, underneath memory of difficulties, these are what can matter when students are diagnosed with having memory difficulties. That is what in the brain is playing a role, like the musical instrument. And that is what we have to look into. Auditory processing disorders have this displayed cognitive function involved in this performance of the auditory processing. And if they are at some degree impacted, and especially in more severe cases, you will see students very impacted in their auditory processing. So they need to be addressed. The executive function difficulties have these cognitive functions involved, and underneath this profile, we have to see at what extent, again, these cognitive functions are underperforming. So this is what we are looking at with the Arrowsmith program. I give the word to Debbie again, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Rita. As you see some of those diagnoses, and as Rita said, you know, those diagnoses are around the world. Children are being diagnosed with that with those learning difficulties around the world. And another one that I hear come up quite often as I travel and meet with parents and educators is attention. Attention has particular attention these days. And so I thought I'd spend a little bit of time on attention. So attention and our brains happens in the prefrontal cortex. It actually is like the CEO of the brain. It organizes and plans what the rest of our brain is going to do. It gives us self-direction. It gives us mental initiative. It helps us set goals. It helps us execute tasks and achieve. It helps us be independent and helps us navigate the social world. This is an alarming figure to me, that our current attention spans are declining. And at the moment, there is about a 47-second attention span on any screen. And why that's alarming, because the more time we spend doing a particular task, the more our brain changes. This is the joy of neuroplasticity. The more the brain changes to adapt to what it does most. So 47 seconds on screen, that could hold our attention span at 47 seconds. The good thing is, of course, that neuroplasticity is used and can change our brain. So that's a very positive note to take away from this webinar today. Let's have a look at attention, and if someone's struggling with attention, what that might look like in the classroom. So you might find inconsistent performance. So in some classes or some particular subjects, grades could go up and down depending on the particular subject that the student is being reported on. You might have incomplete assignments or miss homework deadlines because the scheduling or the organization isn't there. You struggle, the child could struggle to stay engaged. They could show disruptive behavior or difficulties around that or difficulties following rules because they can't hold that attention. They are described as being inattentive or hyperactive or easily distracted. We've heard these terms, and probably in some regards, someone has described ourselves as that in a particular task that we've needed to do. I think one thing we have to remember as parents and as educators is that the children don't stay at school for the whole lives. Then they have to enter the workplace. So what happens, how does attention difficulties show up in the workplace? So there's difficulties with time management. So fitting a task into a period of time or keeping to deadlines. Managing the multiple workloads or the very long to-do lists, managing and prioritizing those. Feeling overwhelmed and distracted. Struggling to read long emails or documents because there's so much detail in there. So, or staying focused in meetings or conversations, and unable to receive feedback around the task you are being given, because that's sometimes hard to hear. But also, attention difficulties turn up in every aspect of our life, and it can turn up like struggling to establish and follow routines or a personal organization, having a hard time starting a task and completing the task, struggling to maintain jobs or relationships, feeling kind of stuck where you are in your life, and definitely having a feeling of overwhelm. At Arrowsmith, we also like to have what we call a cognitive lens on attention. So what does that mean? That means, again, we go under the label of attention. So we know what it looks like. We know what inattentive behavior could look like, but we're going to go under that label of it, inattention or poor attention, and see what else it could be. I want to give you an example. Just think of yourself at university, in a university in a different country that teaches in a different language. And the course you're in is a medical course. So you're in a medical course in a language you don't understand and don't learn. And then you have to be in that course 5 days a week, 6 hours a day. I think if I was in that class, I would look inattentive because I am not understanding what's going on. I'm looking around at the people around me. Are they understanding? I don't know if they're understanding. Are they able, I can't put my hand up. Should I put my hand up? Where's the book? What task am I supposed to be doing? Because I don't understand. Those behaviors that I'm expressing actually look like I'm inattentive. But actually, it's because I'm not understanding. So with that lens, have a look at some other things that could show up as inattention. If you have a memory difficulty, if you have trouble reading or writing, if you have trouble thinking sequentially, if you have trouble doing mental calculations or solving problems, or if you have a difficulty processing thoughts, if you have a problem if you have comprehension difficulties. At Arrowsmith, we call this a cognitive load. However, what we know also is that those cognitive functions, which we talked about before, those cognitive functions can be addressed. So as we lighten that cognitive load, layer by layer by layer, those behaviors can actually go away. That cognitive load is reduced and that those inattentive behaviors can disappear because actually now you have cognitive functions that are functioning as they should and those inattentive behaviors go away. Before I finish, I am going to touch on a couple of the major cognitive functions that you would have seen pop up as Rita was going through the various diagnoses before. So symbolic thinking is very related to attention. It occurs in our left prefrontal cortex. It's part of the executive function, and this is thinking and problem solving in language. This is what we use to do language tasks and keep attention and keep focus. That symbolic thinking cognitive function tells us, engages the networks of the brain that says, this is important now, and dismiss other information. There's another cognitive function called predicative speech, and this is sequential logic. If someone has this underperforming, their sentence structure when they write or when they speak could sound or look like that it's grammatically incorrect. So the sentences are not in the words are not in the right order in the sentence. Or when they are doing, like on this picture here, they're not doing a mathematical problem in the sequence it should be done in. Or even following a sequential task or instructions step by step, like, for example, tying a shoelace, that becomes, that's a sequential logic. They have trouble doing that. Simple relations, if you speak to anyone in the Arrowsmith world, is probably the cognitive function we speak about the most, because actually it is the cognitive function we use in every task that we do. In fact, I was speaking with the TDCC staff at Abu Dhabi about this one exactly this morning. The symbol relations cognitive function has such an important job because it's a process of the brain that occurs near the parietal, temporal, and occipital lobes, and they're the lobes of the brain that bring information into the brain. And then what the function does, it's a process. So it takes that information, it processes it, it needs to process the information really, really fast, and then connect that new information to known information in the brain. So it's such a critical cognitive function. If you think about going through your day, if you're driving the car, you've got a lot of information coming in into your brain that you have to take account of really quickly and take action with. This is what it's like. If someone has a difficulty here, it shows up as they have poor comprehension, whether that's in what they're reading or in what they're learning, if it's a particular new concept, or they don't understand conversations. Or in a movie, if a child is watching a movie, they keep saying, "What's happening now?" Another unique aspect of symbol relations, if it's weak, is quite often the children don't ask why. They never ask that question, because this is the cognitive function that gives us cause and effect. So if this happens, then this happens. That reasoning, that conceptual reasoning, that causal processing. So if you just think about it, if you don't know that if something happens and then there's an outcome of that, there's a result of an action, you never know that there is a why, because that process isn't working properly. So this is one of the most critical cognitive functions that all of us need working and very strong in our lives. Then we have motor symbol sequencing. Rita talked about this before. This is an automated motor plan and we see it in sorry, actually, Rita.
Okay, I can
talk about this. Sorry, please, Rita,
yes,
talk
no
about
problem.
that. I forgot.
Yes, this is my favorite cognitive function because I have a weakness in that. And so I know it very well. I was talking to the TDCC teachers this morning, to the team, and I explained quite warm-heartedly how important it is, because we see that it is an important aspect of dyslexic profiles. We see it very frequently with our students. That is very impactful because it regards it's involved. It's really the automatic motor plans, putting thoughts on papers. So the putting thought on paper has to have this ability of writing in a sequence. That's why it's motor symbol sequence, the motricity and the sequence. So when a student has difficulty, it is impacted in expressing on paper, doing essays, even reading, because the eye tracking is poor. So they need a pen or a ruler to be able to control on the page every line in order to read, other than to write. That is also impactful in that way. And their thoughts are not coherent, because they might express their thoughts very well verbally, but in the time that they have to put on paper, they are incoherent, messed up, or not very well written graphically. In fact, also these graphic profiles have this component in motor symbol sequencing as a weakness. So the Arrowsmith program addresses for each individual, each student that has difficulties, starting to the level of difficulty. And it as a result of writing better, typing better, writing better in mathematics also, because it's every writing, so chemical formula, equation, this is just putting on paper, and it fails them if it's not performing well. So I did train myself, so I can tell you that now I can write my mail at ease. And that's very, very reassuring for an individual, because writing and reading is like breathing. We really need to be independent learners, and this is very important component of the learning, to be able to express our thoughts on paper, to be able to write our mathematical equation or chemical equation, because it is automatic, like it's in this program, we take care of the accuracy and automaticity through two different exercises that address this cognitive function. Thank you. Debbie?
Thanks so much, Rita. I'm sorry that I jumped in there.
It's okay.
Thank you. And let's have a look at symbol recognition now. You would have noticed this pop up in some of the diagnoses that we saw before, particularly dyslexia. This cognitive function is like the camera in our brain that takes snapshot of the symbols on a page that form words, and then recognizing what those words are. So when this is underperforming, students find it difficult to recognize the words or recognize letters. And so just think of it as that camera. Okay, and then we have quantification sense, which is like the calculator in our brain, which is doing mental calculation of number. So when we ask, which is different, of course, than what Rita was talking about, is actually writing a mathematical equation, which is that automaticity of writing, the motor plan of writing symbols on a page, or the logical sequence of doing algebra, which uses symbol relations. Quantification sense is when we ask students to do that mental calculation, or when they're working and they have to give change really quickly. That's quantification sense. Or even in sport, I don't know how many of you are cricket fans, but if you want to calculate how many runs there is to go before someone gets a century, and you're doing that quickly as you're watching cricket, that's what you're calling on, quantification sense. So what is Arrowsmith? Last couple of slides now before we go to questions. So what is Arrowsmith? Well, actually, it's a cutting-edge cognitive program that has been around now for 46 years, and we enhance and strengthen the brain. It's backed by science. It used scientific research to be created, and it has used that science of neuroplasticity to create the exercises to change brains now for 46 years. It strengthens the brain to learn efficiently and effectively. So all of us actually can strengthen these cognitive functions. You don't just have to have them at a difficult level to be able to strengthen them, because if you think about it, our brains can always be enhanced. That's the principle of neuroplasticity, that the brain can change. The brain's ability to change its physical structure and its functional organization. This science has been around now for 70 years, that the brain can change. And it can change, as I said, the physical structure, its organizational structure. It can form new neural networks and connections across our lifespan, which is also really good as you're entering that senior phase of your life. And then the exercises are also use these principles on the screen here of neuroplasticity. These are the principles that need to be in place for an exercise to strengthen particular targeted functions. So differentiated stimulation. We can give the brain general stimulation. However, Arrowsmith actually targets and stimulates a particular cognitive function, so that differentiated stimulation. You need attention to task to strengthen, to use the principle of neuroplasticity to strengthen. You need sustained engagement. So you need to be doing a task over a longer period of time. It needs to be a task where your brain is actually working effortlessly, not too hard because the brain won't engage. Or if it's too easy, the brain also won't engage. So it just has to be at that level. In education, we call it that instructional level, the level that is achievable. In fact, what we say in an Arrowsmith classroom is Arrowsmith never gives you anything that you can't achieve, which is sometimes different than when a child is in a classroom and are constantly being given things that they know they can't achieve. Arrowsmith never does that, but we make the brain work effortlessly to complete tasks. And what we also do is we give them something, we present them with an exercise that is novel, that is different to the brain. Because what we need to do, we need the brain to engage in it. We need it to be curious about what that task is so it will keep that engagement. So they're the principles of neuroplasticity and the principles that are that the exercises of Arrowsmith are based on. We call Arrowsmith a capacity-based program. It's a little different than perhaps what we do in traditional education when we're working with children that have learning difficulties. And I've been in education for more than 40 years now. And typically what we do is we ask the children to use their strengths, which actually is a human instinct. All of us use our strength parts of our brain to do tasks. And that's what we do in school. And sometimes we also work around the problem in school by either modifying the curriculum or putting some assistive technology in there or put strategy into work around it. But actually what Arrowsmith does, we go in and we target the difficult area and we increase and strengthen that capacity. So actually, rather than working around, we change the student. We change the capacity of the student to learn. So we go in and target that very, very specifically. And by having an increased capacity to learn, we achieve better, we complete work on time, we attend to detail, we understand what's happening in the world around us. It helps us to maintain relationships and have a growth mindset. And if we remember going back to the World Health Organization definition of mental health is we can be productive members of society. So thank you for listening to me for this period of time. I'm really looking forward to answering questions. And now I'm going to hand over to the TDCC staff to take us through questions. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you very much, Debbie and Rita, for the comprehensive discussion about the Arrowsmith. So now we are on the question and answer part, wherein if you have any questions, I think there are already some questions that were raised in our chat box, and let me just read it to you so you can answer them. First would be, I think the first one is because they are asking about the principles, which was just discussed, and they were just asking how it differs from the neurofeedback.
I'm not a neurofeedback expert, so I don't really want to pretend that I understand the differences. So I really can only speak to Arrowsmith exercises and how we strengthen that. So I'm not able to talk about those differences.
All right, so we move on to the next question from Dana. Would the other side of the spectrum, hypercalculia or hyperlexia, also have difficulties in cognitive functions in terms of processing, being highly advanced in some areas, but deficient in others?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, Barbara Arrowsmith Young herself was highly gifted, who created the program, was highly gifted, but she was also learning disabled. So she had like the spectrum of functioning in various different functions. But if you don't even have a learning difficulty and are highly gifted, you will still have an uneven profile. So those functions can always be strengthened and across our lifetime. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Debbie. And next question from Albie. Does the program have training for adults interested in learning the Arrowsmith framework?
Absolutely. So just like what's happened at TDCC, Arrowsmith licenses the program to educational organizations that want to offer the program to their clients or their students, and then the organization chooses the facilitators that they want trained in the program. The facilitators then undertake the Arrowsmith training protocol that is attached to the program that that educational organization wants to administer or offer to their clients. So yes, absolutely. And so that's the training to be a facilitator. I also want to make sure I say that Arrowsmith is for every age. I think if you want to be a participant in the program, so I think our oldest student so far has been 85. So because if you think about it, we all have the same cognitive functions, no matter what age we have the same cognitive functions and need to pull on those cognitive functions for every task that we are doing. So absolutely. So for both participants in the program and for facilitators in the program, there are courses that can occur.
Okay. Just a follow-up for that question. They are asking if their health person can sign up for the training independently from an organization.
No, it has to be through a licensed organization.
Okay,
but you could, that person could reach out to me and I could explain that further if they wanted to reach out to me. Yeah.
And then next question. Yeah, this one is Arrowsmith available online?
Absolutely. Emma, you're on line here. Did you want to talk about that?
Hi, Debbie.
Hi. Yeah,
Okay.
hi, sorry. Yes, I'm able to talk about that. So currently at the Development Child Centre, obviously we've all been trained and we are going to be launching the online programme starting in October, hopefully. So there will be a process where you can register your interest and we will give a questionnaire for you to fill out to see if you are compatible with the programme. And then the next steps would be assessment and things. So there is 3 teachers available at the centre that are going to have various times to be able to facilitate online Arrowsmith programmes. Hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Emma. Yes, and there are programs around the world that are available online for sure.
Yeah.
And that's what TDCC is offering.
Yes, thank you, Emma and Debbie. For that, just stay tuned and please keep in touch or be updated with our social media platforms as we will be launching, and just be updated as we'll be launching Arrowsmith very, very soon. So for those who are interested to participate or to enroll their children to the Arrowsmith program, just wait for our announcements via social media. And then, are there any more questions? Some are asking, maybe they are not yet here during the presentation of the video. The video was recorded and will be given to all the participants. So if you miss some of the parts, you can just wait and it will be sent to all the participants who registered in this webinar. And I think, can we just have one more or 2 more questions before we end this webinar? Any more questions? Here, there is a pre or post test respectively before and after the training, and how you quantify the reconfiguration among brain networks.
That's a really, really critical question, actually. So when if a child is having a learning difficulty, so it may not be for all Arrowsmith participants, but if a child is having a learning difficulty, we recommend that they have an Arrowsmith assessment. And the Arrowsmith assessment assesses the functioning of the different cognitive functions that Arrowsmith can address or strengthen. And after that assessment, we create the cognitive profile, which you heard me talk about. We create a cognitive profile outlining the function and how it is functioning on a rating scale of 12-point rating scale. Then what our system does is we triage those cognitive functions. We create the program, if that person is going into an Arrowsmith program, and depending on how many hours per week that particular person is going to be doing Arrowsmith, we create the program for that individual that addresses or strengthens the most critical cognitive functions for that person. So the program of work is individualized according to the cognitive program of that person. So I think that answers that question, and that's certainly the approach that TDCC are going to be using.
Yes, and any more questions for the program? So just stay tuned, because we will be very, very soon sharing all the details of the Arrowsmith program. So I guess that would be it, but please stay tuned for our announcements. And once again, let's give our hands to Miss Debbie and Miss Rita for this wonderful presentation of the Arrowsmith program. Again, thank you very much, Debbie and Rita.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rita and Debbie. Thank you. Any last word, Debbie, before we post the announcement?
No,
Thank you.
absolutely
Thank you
not.
for having us. Thank you for having us.
So
we are
much.
very happy. Thank you.